In a total blackout, a substation has exactly one chance to save itself from a catastrophic failure. To see what happens in that single moment, we're going inside a system hidden in a back room that never sleeps. It's the substation's last line of defense, the DC battery bank. Let's build it up, one piece at a time, until the whole thing makes complete sense. Let's start with the problem the battery bank is there to solve. When a fault hits the network, a protection relay has to detect it and tell a circuit breaker to open, which clears the fault before it can damage equipment. But opening that breaker takes energy, and the fault has often weakened or knocked out the local supply at the same time. So the substation can't trust its alternating current supply to be there when it's needed most. Now, you might wonder why we don't just use a backup generator. The reason is time. A generator takes seconds to start, but a fault happens in milliseconds. A battery is the only power source fast enough to react instantly. So the answer is to run all of this critical control on direct current, which we shorten to DC. DC can be stored in a battery and delivered the instant it's required, whether the grid is alive or not. So what exactly does this DC system feed? Think of it as the nervous system of the substation, quietly powering everything that has to keep working when the main supply does not. The battery connects to a common bar called the DC bus. From there, the power splits two ways. It feeds the brain, the protection relays that make the decisions, and it feeds the muscles, the trip and closing coils that physically move the heavy breakers. On top of that, it runs the control and monitoring, the communications, and the emergency lighting. Without DC, the substation is both blind and paralyzed. It can't see a fault, and it can't act on one. Now let's look at the battery bank itself. It's built from many individual cells wired in series, so their voltages add up to the level the substation needs. Most banks sit at around 125 volts DC. You'll also find 110 volts, and on large transmission sites, 220 or 250. The communications equipment often runs from its own separate 48-volt bank. The cells themselves are usually a proven chemistry, not the lithium in your phone. Flooded lead acid, which is cheap and extremely long-lived, sealed lead acid, which needs less maintenance, or nickel cadmium, which tolerates extreme temperatures and deep discharge. Utilities choose these because they are predictable and last for decades. In a substation, predictable is worth more than exciting. Here's a question that catches people out. If the battery is so important, what's powering the substation's DC loads day to day? The answer is the battery charger, which is really a rectifier. That's a device that takes the station's alternating current supply and converts it into smooth DC. And the charger does two jobs at once. It feeds all the DC loads directly, and at the same time, it keeps the battery topped up, holding the battery at a steady voltage so it stays full without overcharging is called float charging. So in normal operation, the battery barely does anything. It simply floats across the bus, fully charged, waiting. If the battery has been drained, the charger can raise its voltage for a while to recharge it faster, and that's called a boost charge. Now, we can answer the question we started with. What happens when the incoming supply fails? The charger has no input, so its output falls away, but the battery is already connected across the bus, floating there the whole time. So the moment the charger drops out, the battery simply carries the load. There's no switch to throw and no gap in supply because nothing actually had to change over. The relays stay powered, and if a breaker needs a trip, the coil still gets the energy to do it. That seamless handover is the entire reason the battery bank exists. From the DC bus, the power has to be split up and sent to all those circuits safely, and that's the job of the DC distribution board. Think of it as the fuse box for the whole DC system. Each outgoing circuit, which we call a feeder, leaves through its own fuse or miniature circuit breaker. That way, a fault on one circuit blows only its own protection and the rest of the DC system keeps running. Critical circuits, like the trip supplies, are often duplicated and kept separate so that a single problem can never take the protection offline. So, how big does the battery bank need to be? It's sized for a number called autonomy, which is how long it must run the whole DC load on its own, with no charger at all. Often, that's several hours. Enough time for an operator to find and fix the supply problem. On top of that standing load, the bank must keep enough in reserve for the final duty cycle, which is the burst of energy to trip and close breakers right at the end. Engineers size it down to the end of discharge voltage. That's the lowest the cells can fall to while still operating the relays and coils reliably. Go below it, and the protection can no longer be trusted. There's a subtle but important detail in how the DC system is wired. It is usually left unearthed. That means neither side of the battery, the positive or the negative, is connected to ground. Here's why that helps. If one side accidentally touches ground, you get a single earth fault, but nothing actually stops working. The system keeps running, and your protection stays fully available. Even so, that first fault needs to be found and fixed quickly. Because if a second earth fault then appears on the other side, the two faults together form a path that can short the battery or even trip a breaker on its own. So here is a practical field tip. The moment you see a DC earth fault alarm, nothing has tripped yet. The system is built to ride through it. But treat it as urgent because you are now just one fault away from a phantom trip that could take the entire site offline. All of this rests on one assumption, that the battery will actually deliver its rated capacity on the day it's needed. A battery can sit on float for years looking perfectly healthy and still fail to hold up under load when it finally has to. That's why maintenance is taken so seriously. The voltage of each cell is checked and the connections are kept clean and tight. And every so often, the whole bank is given a capacity test. That's a controlled discharge that proves it can still do its job. A battery bank you haven't tested isn't really a backup, it's an assumption. So let's bring it all together. A substation runs its protection and control on DC because that power has to be there even when the grid is not. The battery bank is a store of that energy, sitting at a steady voltage on the DC bus. A charger does the everyday work and keeps the battery full, and the instant the supply fails, the battery takes over with no gap and no interruption, so the breakers can still trip. And the substation can still protect itself. It's a simple idea. It's carried out with extreme care, and it's working quietly right now under every substation on the grid. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.